when we hear that 70% of transformations fail, why is that so compelling? And where did this original statistic come from? I'm Natalia Loback, and this is the Change Course podcast. I've spent my career leading complex change and transformation in organizations. And over my career, I've discovered what makes complex transformational change stick. Connected change is all about leading successful change within the context of the organization. And here at the Change Course podcast, we're all about making change sustainable. So listen in, drop us a like, a comment, and let us know how we can help you connect and change. In last week's episode, I made a pretty bold claim and a pretty bold statement that this statistic claiming that 70% of transformations fail was fake and bogus. And okay, I admit I was, maybe a little bit dramatic, but I do have to be honest, I keep seeing this everywhere, and I've been seeing it everywhere for a really long time. Okay, let me be completely honest. Yes, I knew last week when I recorded the first episode that it really wasn't a true quote unquote statement. And I went down this journey of trying to figure out exactly where this came from. And honestly, I'm not the first person to do this. So, I do need to give credit to all of the other change practitioners out there who have been constantly trying to debunk this statistic. So I had a little fun with this episode because it gave me an opportunity to try a few different things. So I thought, why not? I've been doing academic research for a long time. I actually was in academia at the very beginning of my career. And so developed really good research chops. Like I know how to do good research. But I'm no longer a research analyst, and I don't actually have a whole lot of people to help me with this. So I thought I would ask ChatGPT for a little bit of help. And let me tell you, what normally would have taken me a good 4 to 5 hours of my day really got narrowed down in the space of about half an hour. And I asked ChatGPT what was the origin of this statistic. So I included the screenshots of my chat in the show notes. So go check it out. If you haven't tried out this tool, it's worth a shot. I mean, it's really interesting just to see where we are today. And I'd encourage you to try it because it's only going to get better, right? Like this kind of thing is only going to get better. So I got some pretty good results. I was like, oh, wow, that's not bad. And to be honest, the other thing I have to thank you for is all of the comments and interactions that happened over the course of the week related to episode 1 of this 3-part series. So thank you especially to Dr. Jen Fram. I saw your article actually prior to recording episode 1. And I've got to give you the credit for doing that, original research into like, where has this shown up? Where did this come from? And why did it sort of start to snowball a little bit? And I've also included another link of a more recent breakdown that includes a bit more on the front end. So, where Dr. Fram left off, there's a little bit more history that's come to light in more recent years. And then, I also did the quote unquote big firm consulting scrape to see what else was out there. And I mean, McKinsey has basically built their entire transformation practice on this scare tactic of, well, 70% fail, so let's make sure you're part of the 30%, right? I mean, it's it's a fairly common sales approach, right? Tell people they're going to fail, get them really scared, tell them if they hire you, then you have the recipe and, the magic sauce that's going to make them successful. And I get it, right? I mean, that's one way to build a practice. It's one way to build a business. It's not the way I do it, but I've worked in consulting. I kind of know the game. I also saw this repeated again at Boston Consulting Group. I mean, they released a big, huge white paper based on a survey that they did. So the white paper I'm referring to from Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, titled Flipping the Odds of Digital Transformation Success, uses this 70% quote unquote statistic, right? And they say, only 30% of transformations are successful, but if you hire us and do these 5 things, then you raise your chance of success to 80%. And of course, right, they're the ones with the secret sauce. So, make sure you hire them to help you. I mean, fine, I get it. But then when you start digging into how they actually get their numbers, you look at the, little box that's on page 9, and they talk about their proprietary research. So the way they position it is they say, we took a look at 70 of our digital transformations that we did, right? And they did external research among 825 executives who have undertaken digital transformations in their own companies. Okay, now let's just be completely clear here. 825 executives? I mean, they're not a representative sample. They didn't go out and actually just look at, what industries are we looking at? We know we're looking at digital transformation, but did we actually take a representative sample of executives and organizations? What level of executive did they survey? And also, I mean, they have to be known to the consulting group's research department. I mean, it's not a randomly assigned, it's not a survey with any kind of scientific or statistical significance. This is market research, right? And let's be honest here. They're not going to talk about do 70% of transformations fail or not. What they want is people to come to them in order to help lead successful transformations, right? Like that's the business. So there's no incentive for them to go against what is quote unquote commonly believed, right? So if you're seeing 70% everywhere, then they're not looking at is that number right? What they're looking at is how do we actually compel those people to come to us and build our business. So again, you see the number repeated, but it's just part of the survey. It's just, they don't want to go against what is commonly believed in terms of how, what's the failure rate, right? Like there's no incentive for them to correct that number. And honestly, that's not what the research is about, but it's made to look like it's valid and it's not. None of it is, right? And then we get to what this entire episode today is about, because Eureka, I found it. And I ended up ordering a really interesting book on Amazon for an overnight delivery called Reengineering the Corporation by Michael Hammer and James Champy. This book was published in 1993. And to give you a sense of sort of where that fits in terms of the ongoing history of change management, Kotter's book, Leading Change, was published in 95. And a bunch of the other change methodologies that are really popular today, including ProSci, you look at bridges, transitions, they're all in that 1990s, late 90s, mid to late 90s kind of time period. And it's interesting because we have to think about what was happening in the world at that time. Now, if you've been listening to me for a while, you'll understand that I actually have living memory of this time period, which makes me laugh a little bit because, yes, it does date me, but that's fine. And what was happening in the workplace during this time was the very first part of digital transformation. Corporations had been running pretty much the same way since the Industrial Revolution. People were driving the business. You had a few innovations like the telephone, early fax machines in the 90s, right? But you didn't have the internet. You didn't have email, electronic communication, and the like. Computers were starting to enter into the workforce and the workplace and disrupt the way we work. And this was a massive shift and a massive change that was happening at this time. So when I look at this, I don't see this as a coincidence in terms of all of this really interesting change, literature, and thinking coming out of this time period. It totally makes sense. One of my very first change roles was actually not called change management. It was actually, my title was business process reengineering specialist. And a lot of this change dogma comes from this idea from Hammer and Champy around business process reengineering. And if you are looking at designing and implementing a very strong and compelling change, you always need to go back to business process, especially for things like a digital transformation where you're introducing new tools and new systems that actually can take part of the process and automate it. That's, a conversation for another episode. And as we roll out more and more pieces of connected change to share with our community, that's also part of the foundation that you've got to build as a good change practitioner. You've got to understand the foundations that you're building from. Yes, change is all about people. And I talk a lot about the emotional impacts of change, but the base of that is coming from the change in what we actually do. So when people are changing in an organization, it has to do with how they do their work. So what they're actually doing. And that all goes back to things like business process and the operating model and the good foundations that you have in terms of the way that the organization actually produces value. I've talked about this a lot and how that's linked to culture as well. All of these things are interlinked inside an organization. The purpose of the organization. It all comes back to the processes as well that are built in order to execute upon that purpose, execute upon that strategy. So the initial change literature was really looking at this because this is where it all kind of began. This is where they started to see, if we're going to implement new technology, if we're going to put a computer on somebody's desk rather than a typewriter, what does that actually mean, right? And how do things change if we can connect with each other inside the organization without having to pick up a phone, go to someone's office, go to someone's desk, walk around? If we can send messages, how does that change things, right? It's interesting to put ourselves back, take that time machine back to the early 90s and see just how much was different then. It really, really was. It's actually fascinating because it was that first advent of digital tools that started to become implemented in the organization. And it's totally fascinating. Anyway, I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but the context of where this all comes from is really important. So I picked up Hammer and Champy's book, Reengineering the Corporation, and what everybody's been looking for is right there on page 221, the very first paragraph of the final chapter in the book, chapter 13, Succeeding at Reengineering. And I'm just going to read, we're going to do story time a little bit here, and I'm just going to read it to you. Chapter 13, Succeeding at Reengineering. Sadly, we must report that despite the success stories described in previous chapters, many companies that begin re-engineering don't succeed at it. They end their efforts precisely where they began, making no significant changes, achieving no major performance improvement, and fueling employee cynicism with yet another ineffective business improvement program. Our unscientific estimate is that as many as 50 to 70% of the organizations that undertake a reengineering effort do not achieve the dramatic results they intended. Nonetheless, while we say reengineering is often unsuccessful, it is not a high-risk endeavor. This apparent oxymoron isn't oxymoronic at all. Consider the difference in risk between roulette and chess. Roulette is a high-risk endeavor. Chess is not. Although a player may lose at chess as frequently as at roulette, roulette is purely a game of chance. Once the money is put down, players have no control over the outcome. In chess, chance plays no part in the outcome. The better player can expect to win. Loss results from ability and strategy. As with chess, so with reengineering, the key to success lies in knowledge and ability, not in luck. If you know the rules and avoid making mistakes, you're extremely likely to succeed. So, what does this tell us? I mean, first of all, it was a guesstimate, an estimate that they made at the very beginning of the change revolution. This was the first publication that really started talking about changing process and how you do that and how you do that effectively inside an organization. Everybody else came after this. But what felt right in terms of the success or failure rate ended up taking on a life of its own. And what I have to say about this book is that it's actually quite fabulous. And so many of what is stated in the last chapter, in chapter 13, is really change management and change leadership gold. This is one of the places you should start if you really want to understand what's going to make you successful, because they had it down. And a lot of this that they put in here has been lost in some of the later iterations of change management methodology and approach. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. I mean, the book is worth a read. It's actually quite fantastic. And it's short too. It's, 250 pages. It's not going to take you a lot of time to get through it, and it's really worth a read. But here's the thing. It was an unscientific estimate, and it seems to have taken on a life of its own. Michael Hammer addressed this in a later book, and I ordered it. It hasn't arrived yet. So next episode, I'll talk about that as well. But, why does something like this take on a life of its own and become what is almost an urban legend? Come on. I mean, we see it repeated everywhere. We see these big organizations building compelling cases upon this statistic, which is entirely not a statistic and, a bit bogus. It was a general feeling that these two authors had based on the work that they had done, but they say themselves that they did not undertake any scientific research to validate that. It was simply an estimate, simply a feeling that they had around how organizations actually worked. But the important thing here is that they make the point that change is not a one-time deal, right? Change is something that occurs over time. And if you don't get it right the first time, you try again. Like, you don't let off the gas, you keep going. And I think that's what has been lost in some of this thinking around change. Like a roulette game, you think you're just putting your money down and leaving the rest to chance, but that's not true. What they're saying is that it's all about strategy. It's all about thinking and preparation. And when you have a circumstance change, when the other player makes a move, you've got to think about how you change your game to win and strategize based on the circumstances that you find yourself in. Change is an agile endeavor. It's not just, full money in, everything on the table bet one time. Right? So in my next episode, we're going to talk about why this happens. Why something that initially was a feeling or an estimate or a guess takes on a life of its own and becomes a legend in and unto itself. So stay tuned for next episode. I think you'll enjoy it. And thank you to all of you who responded to my questions, who provided me feedback and insight, and, got into some great discussions, raised some really good questions, and, challenged me this week. I really appreciated it. And it was a lot of fun. So thank you to all of you for, getting into the ring and sparring with me a little bit. I really appreciate it. And I hope that this was helpful to helping you understand where this is all coming from. And next week we'll get into why and why these things happen this way. So listeners, I invite you to get engaged, follow us here at the podcast or on LinkedIn. We also have the podcast on YouTube. And check out Connected Change and subscribe to the Navigator newsletter. You'll catch all of this content. But if you want to hear the next episode, drop us a like, follow us so that you'll get it before everybody else. And I look forward to bringing that to you next week. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, I invite you to like, share, rate, and subscribe because it helps others find us. Change Course is brought to you by Charthouse Advisory Services and ConnectedChange.com. Our music is Levity by Emily Clausen. Show notes have moved. We're now at ConnectedChange.com. So visit us there under the Change Course podcast page, and you'll find a list of all the resources that I've mentioned here today. While you're visiting us, sign up for the Change Navigator newsletter. You'll keep on top of all things change, and every month we are sharing exclusive content and resources only with our subscribers. So don't miss out. Sign up at ConnectedChange.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to change course.